Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm here in Richmond, Virginia, where it's a little drizzly and cool out, but very happy to be speaking with everyone today about stress and helping with support for your adrenals during the holidays. So my name is Baylor Rice. I'm one of the clinical liaisons for Revelation Pharmacy. I work out of South River here in Richmond, Virginia. To kind of help get an idea here, Revelation Pharmacy, Pharma Corp really is pulling together a number of top-notch pharmacies around the country. And so right here we have Austin Compounding Pharmacy, Community Clinical Pharmacy, Eastern States Compounding Pharmacy up in New Hampshire, Everwell down in Pensacola, Innovation Compounding in Kennesaw, Georgia, Pincole in Colorado, Pharmacy Specialist Compounding Pharmacy in Orlando, Florida, and then us South River here in Richmond, Virginia. So really we're under the umbrella of what's called Revelation Pharma Corp. So as we're going through today, certainly I'm here at South River, but you've got wonderful staff and a great group of folks across the nation here that are more than happy to help you and willing and able. So feel free to reach out to one of the local facilities where you're at. So with that being said, I do not disclose and give my slides prior to the FDA, nor would they really have time nor want to review them. So just to let you know, that's the disclaimer. So about kind of who we are and what we do, we are compounding pharmacies. So specifically, my role is to specialize in natural medicine. So really vitamins, minerals, nutritionals, homeopathics, all we can do, think organic, what we can do naturally to optimize our lives. So we do offer personalized consultations to where you can set up a consult with one of our specialists and book time, and you can do that in person or Zoom, telephone, whatever's easiest and or works most applicable. We've got folks trained in functional medicine, integrative therapies as well. We do a variety of different testing from saliva, urine, hair analysis, stool analysis, neurotransmitters, micronutrients. We can even utilize a company and looking at blood work too. So really working on getting the data to help us piece together your health puzzle to get you to a better place. So that's just a little kind of quick overview for those that are new with us today. So now to get into really the thought behind compounding, it is the triad. So it is that patient practitioner pharmacist relationship. So really we do work as a team with your provider to really get you the best health outcomes possible. So to dive into our topic today with adrenals, I think it's always important to kind of start with a frame of thought process. And really, persons with lower health risks tend to live longer than those with higher health risks. Makes sense, right? If you're driving your car 120 miles an hour down the highway, taking more risk, you're going to probably be more apt to have an accident. And not only do persons with better health habits survive longer, but in such persons, disability is postponed and compressed into fewer years at the end of life. So really, the trick is, how do we pull this bar up? How do we keep optimal health as high as we can for as long as we can? Ultimately, if we can push back the endpoint, that's fantastic. But even if we die at the same age, no matter what we do, I want to go like a banshee and just one day drop dead and be gone. So ultimately, later rather than sooner. So the reason why I'm sharing this with you is what is one of the big factors affecting this decline of health? And certainly that is the adrenal gland. So that is stress. So overexposure to stress hormones accounts for about 75 to 90% of all primary care visits in the US. That's a lot, an awful lot. So when you think about it, almost all illness is stress related in some way. It's caused by stress, aggravated by stress, causes stress itself. So you can look at the link to the 6 leading causes of death: heart disease, lung cancer, lung ailments, cancer in general, accidents, cirrhosis, as well as suicide. Number one reason why people eat poorly, quit healthy lifestyle programs, and practice substance abuse is, of course, leading back to stress, right? So stressful things in life that trigger the release of alarm hormones don't make us sick, but it's really our body's unique response to these stressors that can make us sick. So otherwise stated, if you think about it, look at the data that's there, 65% of genetics is modifiable. That's huge. I'll repeat that. 65% of genetics is modifiable. So just because you may be genetically encoded for disease doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get that disease. However, certainly if you act like, drink like, eat like, exercise like your ancestors, then odds are you're going to be more likely to get that disease. And certainly, as this slide alludes, stress is affecting that, right? Stress is a big aggravator to things. So stress has kind of changed certainly through the years. So we certainly have this response to stress. So we see or perceive this stress, signals to the hypothalamus. That's releasing cortical releasing hormone, sending signals to the pituitary, release of ACTH. That's stimulating the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are popping out cortisol, and the cortisol is taking care of that issue, right? Then hopefully you have resolution. Now, this is a busy slide. So let's I guess, simplify this just a little bit. So if you think about caveman time, right? Mr. Caveman, Mrs. Caveman would go out, try to get food. Go and get food. Well, here's a zebra. That's easy prey. I'm going to grab the zebra. Well, Mr. Lion's hanging around the corner, and Mr. Lion's coming after you trying to get the zebra. Well, what happens? One of many things. Number one, you get eaten by the lion. Game over, right? Well, endpoint happens quick there. Otherwise, that cortisol, right? That hypothalamus, your brain, pituitary, sending that cortisol, and all of a sudden you've got superhuman strength and you run away from that lion super fast. Get back to your cave, things reset, right? Or lion eats your arm off. You fight him, you do a good fight, you come back. And then if you've ever had an accident and afterwards you think, how in the world did I go through that? The brain kind of shunts that, right? Kind of blocks that issue at hand momentarily. So cortisol serving as that anti-inflammatory, helping to resolve the issue. So that's what used to happen, right? We would have these times of stress, and then it would resolve, stress, resolve, stress, resolve. Well, now, instead of that, right, to where we're having things and it's resolving, now our baseline is here, and then we're having stressors on top of that, right? We're never really fully backing down. So, thinking back prior to 2008, it was probably 65% of the patients that came through my door had some sort of adrenal issue really kind of impacting them. Well, now, certainly, I hate to say post-COVID, but because I think COVID's kind of here to stay forever to some extent, but post our big lockdowns and everything else, that number is up to about 90%. 90% of the folks that walk through my door, the adrenals are impacting health and quality of life to some way, shape, or form. So certainly that's the segue into why we're here today. So it's this continual exposure to stressors leads to this biochemical event that excites the sympathetic nervous system, and that's really putting the body on this high alert status. So an individual stressor tolerance certainly is going to vary depending on all of these tolerances. So as I alluded to, genetics, diet, your lifestyle and toxins that you're exposed to, your health status, your occupation, right? So, are you, certainly during COVID, healthcare practitioners, we were a lot more frontline workers staring stress in the face. Your social skills, your community network, your family, your friends, your overall human experience, all of these affect that relationship and that tolerance to stress and how your body handles that. And really, when we exceed that personal threshold of stressor tolerance, is that's when we break down, and everybody's breakdown is a little bit unique. Now, I think for most of us, the first piece of stress that when we think back, when did we first experience it? When did we first have some sort of cognitive attachment piece to it? And I think for many of us, that goes back to elementary school and maybe our first test or our first play that we had to be in. And how that manifested itself was with an upset stomach, right? You kind of get the butterflies. We call them kind of butterflies before a test or before an event, or for athletes before a race, right? It's that parasympathetic, sympathetic response to the gastrointestinal system. So certainly breathing difficulties, cardiovascular, physical, emotional, social, mental impairment, and sleep, all of these things and systems are impacted by stress and that breakdown. So common symptoms, common adrenal symptoms. I have this on a checklist. When someone schedules a consultation, we ask these and really ask you to kind of grade it from absent, mild, moderate to severe. So all of these, if you will, we would have in columns, and you would kind of check off where you are so we can kind of look. So I'll read through these. So fatigue, lack of energy, crashing in the afternoon, craving salty foods, craving sugars and carbs, exhausting easily, decreased sex drive, sensitive to weather changes, circles under eyes, wounds healing slowly, body tender, sensitive to touch, puffy, swollen all over, or mind racing. So if you're going through and going check, 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 and of course, going back to absent, mild, moderate, severe, if you're checking an awful lot over here, then we really need to be thinking about looking at this more in depthly. But certainly if you're going through and checking off a bunch of these, yes, odds are your adrenals are going over here going, hey, help me, help. I need some support. So when we think about this and think about the symptoms, there's an over responsive. There's also this hypothalamic response with an under responsiveness. So you can kind of understand, because it's not just I've got adrenal issues and it is just one way. It does oscillate, right? So there's an excess of sympathetic nervous system versus an excess of the parasympathetic nervous system. You can be hyper aroused, or you can also have, fatigue and you're just, I just feel lifeless, right? With low motivation and apathy. We can have elevated cortisol. We can also have low cortisol. We can have weight loss. We can also have weight gain, decreased appetite or increased appetite, decreased libido. We can have hypersomnia, excessive sleep. We can have insomnia. Heart can start racing. We can also see increase in autoimmune disorders. We can see pain, inflammation. It can exacerbate those with chronic pain. So certainly variety of symptoms. And there again, it's not just a linear piece here. It can kind of oscillate, and it can change even in individuals as they kind of go through various phases of adrenal fatigue, adrenal exhaustion. So with that, to link it back to, well, what about disease states? Does this kind of tie back? So overproduction versus underproduction. Again, we can have Cushing's or we can have Addison's, depression, obsessive compulsive to seasonal affective disorder, diabetes, anorexia, myocardia, arrhythmias, hypertension, lipids can go up, so increasing your cholesterol, hyperthyroidism versus hypothyroidism, right? So again, kind of depending where you are. And there's a huge link, as you can see. Thyroid hits on both sides of the fence on this one. There's a huge tie with the adrenals back feeding and really having a negative feedback loop to the thyroid gland, which, by the way, to give a shameless plug for the thyroid webinar, next month, we will be having our thyroid webinar, and the link for that will be one of the last slides through here as we go. So what are some of the things that I use for helping to support the adrenals? Well, anybody that's come to me or listened to some of the webinars, certainly I have what I call my Baylor's baseline, right? What should I be taking just for my foundational health? And I don't think anybody can hear this enough. A therapeutic multivitamins or a phytonutrient multi. It's a therapeutic food-based multi with methylated Bs. So very important because half the population has what's called an MTHFR deficiency, so you're not able to metabolize the folic acid B12 properly. So our phytonutrient has the methylated Bs built in. Omega-3 essential fatty acids, good for everything head to toe, vitamin D3, and CBD. CBD hits 220 different systems of the human body. So those are kind of our basics. So that's what we should be doing anyway. Then if going back to kind of how you're checking off, right? Symptoms going back to absent, mild, moderate, or severe, kind of depending where we graduate through this and how many we have checked off, would kind of depend on how many we do. So, you know, if we've got overall just kind of some support for cortisol support as an Ayurvedic adaptogenic formula that helps to support the adrenals. So it is what I kind of refer to as a no harm, no foul. It's not going to suppress adrenal function. It's not going to hyperstimulate the adrenal function. Okay. Adrenal support is another formula that's very close to cortisol support, but think of cortisol support being a little bit more just calming formula versus adrenal support having a little bit more kick in where, okay, my energy, the fatigue is a greater component there. Then I'm going to pull that in. L-theanine, I'll use plus or minus either one of those. L-theanine is derived from the green tea leaf, so it helps balance two main neurochemicals, both norepinephrine as well as epinephrine, but it also has impact on dopamine, serotonin, PEA, histamine, glutamate. It really helps to balance the whole system. L-theanine, 200 milligrams up to 4 times a day. So to give you a visual on L-theanine, kind of takes the weight off the shoulders. So if we take the weight off the shoulders, it can also help on that focus on the task at hand. Works beautiful for that. Tranquil, that formula kind of stress and worry. Okay. Now I'm going to go through a few more of these in just a second, but just I've got a bunch on here so you realize there's not just one adrenal formula we use for everybody. We really individualize therapy and see where that's at, and depending where you're at. You know, if we check the cortisol levels and the cortisol levels are absolutely totally blown and we're just kind of flatlined, we'll use something called cortisol synergy, which has some licorice extract in it. If that's not quite doing it, then certainly we'll go to a compounded hydrocortisone. And a lot of times we'll do that in a packet to where we kind of taper that cortisol so it more naturally mimics that diurnal pattern. Okay, so another way to look at this is kind of that occasionally stressed and anxious. Well, we can do the cortisol support that is going to have a little bit of L-theanine already built into it. And/or we can just do L-theanine by itself. Stressed and wired, either more kind of our stress support formula or cortisol support. Stressed and worried is that tranquil formula. Stressed and mentally fatigued, either auxiliary or cortisol support. And then stressed and tired, that's our adrenal support. And stressed and hot, so that's more stressed and inflamed. With that, I want to see the cortisol levels, and with that, when those cortisol levels are low is where we'll pull in that cortisol synergy. And part of the reason why I want to see the labs for that one before we use that formula is that is going to push up cortisol. So we really want to see the data. These other things are going to be more adaptogenic. So we'll help kind of pull it up a little bit if it's low, likewise help pull it down a little bit if it's high, whereas cortisol synergy is only pushing it up. It doesn't go both ways on that. So I mentioned some salivary cortisol testing. So this is an example of what some of our labs look like. So you may say, well, what about blood work, Baylor? Can I see cortisol with blood? Absolutely, we can look at cortisol with blood. The problem with cortisol with blood, boom, you go into the doctor at 8 o'clock in the morning and it's a single point in time. The normals are like that. They're absolutely huge. So unless you're way down here or way up here, it's really not going to give us the information we need. So I want to see it 4 times during the day. I want to see it. So it's a saliva test. It's take home. You can stop by one of the pharmacies. We can send it to you. It comes with 4 little tubes. You spit in some tubes, you put it in the box. It has FedEx already with it. You send it off. We get the results back in about 2 to 3 weeks. I want to see it before breakfast, before lunch, before bedtime, before dinner. So it should have this diurnal pattern to it, right? So that's why I want to see it multiple times so we can really graph it. Now, occasionally I'll throw in a 5th time period if you're really kind of popping up at that bing 2 to 3 a.m. mark, and you folks will know who you are. When I say that, it'll resonate with you. For that, then we want to look at it times 5. I want to see what it's going on in that early morning hours, right? So when we get the data back, this is a sample. So you can see with this sample, we're kind of down here, right? Optimally, we want to kind of be in the middle of the screen. So we need to pull this up. So that's where we would use potentially 2 different formulas. We would use cortisol support as overall support and adaptogenic for the adrenals. And then we could use something called cortisol synergy, which is going to help drive that cortisol level up and push it and bring it so we can get a more natural rhythm. It should start highest in the day and we should fall as it goes on. Now, I can't tell you how many people I'll see that, man, they're just absolutely flat, right? I'll see it all over the map. Earlier, today I had one that started here and then popped up and then went back down like that. So with that, of course, then we need to work on pulling that down while also pushing this up. So that's where I'm a scientist, I'm a researcher, as well as a pharmacist. I want to see data, right? So what we do is really blend what is your history, what's your family history, personal history, lifestyle, where's the data, where are your symptoms. We kind of pull that in together to give you a very customized protocol for you. Okay. Some other things that we'll use, certainly CBD, cannabinoids, so some dosing for CBD. I've got that in here for you, whether we use tinctures, gummies, or soft gels that help in kind of with overall inflammation and the inflammatory process. A compounded option for you. Now, this I'll refer to as kind of neuroinflammation. So brain inflammation, brain on fire. So a lot of times I'll see this with my high-level executives. We call it executive burnout. Post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, post-concussion. So this is a compounded prescription, so it does require the pharmacy working with your practitioner to get this for you. We do it as a nasal spray. It is a combination of methylcobalamin, which is a B vitamin, and synapsin, which is a ginseng, and so a specialized ginsengicide, and B vitamin, it's got B3 in there, does an amazing job of decreasing that neuronal inflammation. Generally, I start heavier with it. I'll start 2 sprays 3 times a day for the first 30 days. Especially, with concussions and post-injury, we need to get after it and hit it harder and faster. And then as you improve, I'll back off. I also use it, side note, for my Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's patients. It does an amazing job, especially when you 1-2 punch it with CBD. CBD and the synapsin nasal spray does an amazing job of decreasing neuronal inflammation. So lifestyle, right? Exercise, exercise, exercise. Ideally, I want 300 minutes of cardio a week. Now, if you haven't been exercising, then we work up to this, right? Let's say you haven't been doing anything. Then let's start with 5 minutes a day, 2 minutes a day. Then we go to 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, slowly work it up, bringing in some weights. Certainly, if you're not doing anything, then start with 1 day a week, and then 2 days a week, and then kind of that 2 to 3 is the sweet spot. Stretching. As we get older, we tend to get tighter and tighter, especially as we get stressed, right? We get tight, right? Stress, headaches, neck, shoulders, all that gets tight and pulls to the head, the lower back. We want to stay loose. We want to breathe deep, do it often, good belly breathing, right? Do something relaxing 20 minutes a day. I don't care what you do. I don't care, read a book, meditate. Yoga is kind of a 2-for-1er. Pilates is also kind of almost a 2-for-1er / 3-for-1er. So those are fantastic ways, especially if you're a multitasker, I want to kind of do some stretching and some core strength and relax at the same time. That's a great option for you. Ideally, I want 8 hours of straight sleep. Okay. That's going to give the body's ability to really kind of let the adrenals heal and reset to some extent to be able to take on the next day, right? So if you're cutting yourself short, you're running 6 to 7 hours, then you're running short with that and you're going to run a deficit, and that's going to have a negative impact on the adrenals. Now, of course, you may be thinking, well, Baylor, I've always slept 6 hours my whole life and now I feel great. When I sleep more, I feel right. There's always the outliers, all right? But the vast majority, kind of that 8 hours is where the majority. Now, certainly if we go to our teenagers, our younger kids, then, for those guys, I'm going to say 9 hours, maybe even, those prepubescent, even 10 hours. Diet. So we are what we eat. I'm sure most of you have heard that before. Absolutely. Mediterranean style diet is typically where I gravitate to, and from there kind of spin off. Ideally, for most people, now there again the exceptions. Some people do really well with intermittent fasting. So that's, having your last meal at night, not eating anything until lunch the next day. But for the vast majority, having breakfast in the morning, if you're going to eat in the morning, you definitely want protein there. That is the most important time of the day for protein. So that's going to help set up and dictate your glycemic index for the rest of the day. So if we just have more sugars and carbs in the morning, that's when the blood sugar is kind of bouncing around during the day. So overall, low glycemic whole foods, as organic as we can, small frequent meals, finding new comfort foods, maybe some hummus and things instead of that macaroni and cheese, trying to eliminate the trans fats, reducing that refined sugar and artificial sweeteners, and drinking lots of water. So, half your weight. So if you're 150 pounds, we should be getting 75 ounces of water in a day, right? If you're 200 pounds, then that's going to be 100 ounces of water. So sleep. Because sleep's so important, I wanted to spend a few slides on that and kind of illuminate on that just a little bit. Certainly, we're all kind of burning the candle more and more at both ends, and abnormal sleep is now more the norm versus not. For some, it may be more difficulty falling asleep, some difficulty waking up, daytime drowsiness, waking up at night, zoning out during the day, trouble with concentration, clumsy, feeling more emotional, peace all over the place, affecting judgment. So sleep really affects all of these different things. So certainly the FDA does have warnings on your traditional benzodiazepine and benzodiazepine type drugs. They can be addictive, but also certainly you wake up and you're groggy and have negative impacts on the liver. So that's where we've got lots of tricks up our sleeve for different options to help with sleep. There again, that's when we talk, we can really kind of go through and figure out what's going on. Melatonin is a hormone secreted by the pineal gland. So that does decrease as we age. So I do use melatonin. I use it in geriatrics, pediatrics. I'll also use it everybody in between, as well as circadian rhythm and travel across time zones. Typically, we want to kind of get you back into that sleep pattern with whatever we use and then pull back off of it. So melatonin, we've got sublingual, we've got regular tablets and capsules, as well as CR. So our melatonin CR5, that's one of my favorite forms of melatonin. It is a biphasic melatonin, so it releases some initially, and then it releases some more kind of that 2 to 3 a.m. mark. So especially those that are on, that kind of get that ping in the middle of the night, they're not sure why. Think melatonin CR5. Does an amazing job. One at bedtime, about 30 minutes before bed. Otherwise, general sleep issues, for some, just regular CBD does a trick. Absolutely. So our broad spectrum propoxyles are organic is going to have 5 major cannabinoids in it. So that does already have a little bit of CBN already in it. But we also have some sleep gummies and sleep soft gels that have extra CBN. So CBN is one of the cannabinoids that's going to hit sleep a little bit heavier than just straight CBD. We also have what's called Delta 8 THC gummies. So Delta 8 I find works fantastic for sleep. Now, it does have THC in it. So if you have to get drug tested for work, certainly then we would want to avoid that. Same precautions as alcohol. You don't want to drive or operate heavy machinery with it, so be smart. But the advantage of that over Delta 9, for instance, Delta 9 lasts longer. So typically when you do Delta 9, you're going to wake up and still be a little fuzzy and foggy in the morning. Delta 8 has a shorter half-life. So most of the time you wake up in the morning the next day, ready to go. What's nice with it with a gummy too, if the answer is, oh, Baylor, I'm sensitive to things, quarter the gummy, take a quarter of it. Do that for a night. If that doesn't work, then do a half. If that doesn't work, then do 3/4. If that doesn't work, go to 1, right? So you can titrate that dosage up. Typically with Delta 8, do it an hour or 2 before bedtime, okay? Calm Sleep Formula is one of the herbal formulations we have for sleep, as well as Ultimate Sleep Formula. With mind racing, so if your mind is just, then our Delta 8 THC or cortisol manager or Ultimate Sleep can help with that. If sleep and mood is an issue, then our mood food formula or just straight 5-hydroxytryptophan as well for those that are really hypersomnia, right? You're sleeping more than 9 hours and you're still tired. Then we've got a formula called Somnolin that does a very nice job. So again, it's not just, hey, I've got sleep issues, here's the one formula. No. Most of the time, even when I'm consulting with patients, I generally will write down at least 3 different formulas with the directions on, try this one first. If that doesn't work, go to this. If that one doesn't work, go to this. Just because, again, there's also not one magic formula that works absolutely for everybody. So this is a busy slide. I kind of refer to this as my ADD slide, right? This is an overview of the endocrine system. So the hypothalamus regulates the pituitary. Pituitary regulates the sex hormones, the thyroid, as well as the adrenals. Now, as I alluded to earlier, the adrenals have a huge negative feedback loop. This one here is really big. They all impact each other, right? But that one's the biggest negative. So overall, if you have a thyroid issue, this is about as close to always a negative that I'll go with medicine. Otherwise, always and never don't really exist in my vocabulary. This is as close as we can get. If you have a thyroid issue, and I almost guarantee you've got an adrenal issue. Okay. So that's food for thought for you there. And we'll come back and talk a little bit more about the thyroid in just a minute. Antidepressant use in the United States has increased nearly 400% over the last 2 decades. That's huge. That accounts for about 11% of Americans over the age of 12 taking antidepressants and 23% of women between 40 and 59 take antidepressants, which is the highest among any age group and sex group. That's huge. So what can we do? What are some options? Right? Well, we can actually look at your neurotransmitters. We can look at this in a urine test to pull this out to be able to help with the focus, the concentration, energy, anxiety, irritability, OCD, motivation, sex drive, appetite, cognitive function, attention, right? All of these are impacted by those neurotransmitters. So the neurotransmitters are chemical messengers that regulate many of the physical and emotional processes, including movement, stress response, cognitive function, emotions, energy, cravings, pain, and so many other systems within the system. So again, these are our neurotransmitters: serotonin, dopamine, norepi, epi, GABA, glutamate, PEA, and glycine. So we can look at this in a urine test, right? So we can get all that information. So instead of just putting a patient on, hey, you know what, I'm feeling anxious. All right, well, let's put you on some Valium. Or I'm feeling depressed. Let's put you on Prozac. Or I can't sleep. Let me take some Ambien. Well, let's get the data. Let's see where we are. So this is a urine test. Again, very similar to the salivary test for the cortisol. It's a take-home kit. So you can pick it up at one of the pharmacies, or we can send it to you. You pee in a cup, put it in the box. It's got FedEx already with it. You send it off. We get the results back in a couple of weeks. Okay. So if you've got a lot of those types of symptoms, then I definitely advocate, let's look at this data. If you're also kind of more in that moderate to severe with all of the adrenal symptoms on that slide, then maybe we even do a urine plus the saliva combination to where we're looking at the cortisol, and we call that a neuroadrenal panel, to where we're looking at the neuro along with the adrenal piece at the same time. It does save you a little bit of money when we look at it at the same time versus if you were to do both separately. This is a very busy pathway. So these are, this really goes to the neurotransmitter pathway, right? Now, what you'll notice here is what we use to push. So, what do we do when things are high or things are low? Do we turn around and say, hey, well, let's put you on an antidepressant or whatever? No, we can use amino acids and we can use nutritional supplements to push these equations and to affect it. So a lot of times, really, it can be muddy pathways, if you will, from the tryptophan going to the 5-hydroxytryptophan going down and getting metabolized into serotonin, or the tyrosine being metabolized down into dopamine. So what you'll notice in a lot of these reds, you've got a lot of B vitamins. So going back to my statement earlier with what is in the baseline that I recommend, our phytonutrient multi, because it has methylated Bs. Well, methylation hits 350 enzymatic pathways in the human body. A lot of neurochemistry is impacted by the methylated B vitamins. It helps to support all this. So that's one of the main things we also put you on. L-theanine, I discussed this just a little bit already. It is derived from the green tea leaf. It's one of my favorites. I use it so often, really from kids as low as 3 years old up to granny at 103. I'll use it for puppy dogs and kitty cats. So it works good for separation anxiety for those guys, thunderstorms, that sort of thing. We do have dog chews and some other things. We've got chewables as well as capsules for L-theanine. The dosage for adults, 200 milligrams up to 4 times a day. All right. Generally, so here's a quick snippet on that. Typically, non-drowsy, non-goofy, non-loopy, non-addictive. Right? Isn't that great? So 200 milligrams generally going to make you tired. It will take the weight off the shoulders. If you take 400 milligrams at a time, then that can be more like you had a big glass of wine. Okay, with that, then really you're going to kind of feel it. So I will use it during the day, but then sometimes also if you're laying down, getting ready to go to bed and the mind is kind of racing, I'll do 200 to 400 milligrams at bedtime to kind of help with that mind racing piece. Okay, it is something that I hate to say, kind of depending how torqued your system is, kind of depending how this norepi and epi ratio is, how far off that is how long it takes this to take effect. So I have had with patients that, for instance, I'll see this a lot back in September when school starts, moms will come in and go, oh my goodness, I've already gotten a call about little Johnny at school, upsetting the teacher. We'll send them home with some L-theanine, and literally, I can't tell you how many times I've had moms come in back the next day, just giving me a hug with tears in the eyes going, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. It can work that fast. You can see the difference within 30 minutes. However, if you've been pushing yourself a long time and your neurochemistry is just really whacked out, it's going to take a hot minute to get you balanced, okay? So we need to give it. It may take 3 to 4 weeks before we kind of start unwinding that really tight rubber band. So I know that's a huge variable and differential there. But I'd like to share that with you just in case you do take it and notice, wow, could I have seen an effect that quick? The answer is absolutely yes. But also give it time, okay? You got to give it time to take effect. Sex hormones for men and women, and you kind of reaching that menopausal, or for us males, andropausal age. So really, 35 on, unless you're going through premature ovarian failure or something like that, these are the labs that I like to see. And we can look at both either via blood or saliva. Thyroid questions for the patient. Okay, promised you I'd come back to that. So this is, and I'm not going to read through all of these for you. You've got them here. You can read through. If you're going check, 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 Baylor, I've got a lot of these. There's a total of 18 of them. This morning, I had a patient that when we started working with her, she had 18 out of 18 thyroid symptoms checked off. Okay. The majority, most of my patients, I'll see anywhere from 7 to about 13. But yet they've seen their doctor, their practitioner, and all their thyroid labs are normal, quote unquote. Okay. And these are some more of them. So these are all 18. So we're going to talk about this next month, January 11th, 2 o'clock. I'm going to go over what we do for the thyroid and how we hit it. I at least wanted to kind of touch on it just ever so slightly today, since going back to the endocrine slide where that pituitary, you've got the hypothalamus regulating the pituitary, that hits the sex hormones, that regulates also the thyroid, and then the pituitary regulating the adrenals. It's a balance of all three of these, guys. So it's not just being focused over here on the adrenals, depending what age we are. Ideally, I like kind of looking at all of it and making sure all of it's at its happy place to get you to your happiest place, right? What labs do I see? So if you've gone through here and of these 18 symptoms, you've got check, 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 you've got a bunch of them, then let's look at some labs. Okay. What I like to see is free T3, free T4, reverse T3, TSH, TPO, thyroid antibodies, ferritin, and vitamin D. That's what I consider to be a full thyroid panel. Most of the time, what they're going to draw is a TSH with what's called a reflex T4, but not draw the rest of it. I want to see the whole thing, especially if you've got a ton of symptoms. The reason for the ferritin and vitamin D, both ferritin and vitamin D, ferritin is iron stores. Both of them can affect how the triiodothyronine, which is the T3, the active thyroid hormone, binds at the receptor level. So I can have all this other stuff normal, but yet these guys in the toilet, and that's still affecting symptoms. Okay, so that's really kind of the full panel. And then, of course, we look at what your temperature is. What your temperature is, you want to do that first thing in the morning before your feet hit the floor, before you get going, before that heart starts pumping the blood and you get ready for the day. And as well, pulling in symptoms. So labs detect disease, not optimal function. What we're aiming for, optimal function. I want to get that bar up for you as high as we can. So if your practitioner will not order those, you can go to our site at South River RX. You can click on the tab. It's Ultalab tab. It's under, I think, other services. And that gives you the ability to order whatever blood test you want. Okay. The only difference versus if your doc orders it, if your practitioner orders it, then you can run it through the insurance. So this is off of insurance. So especially for those that, number one, your practitioner won't order what you want, or you've got a high deductible, you're in the donut hole, or you don't have insurance, then this is going to be far more cost effective. It gives you about 83% discount off of retail. So it's a very cost effective way to look at these labs. Quality. Absolutely. I'm a huge stickler on quality. I deal with companies that are registered with the FDA, following good manufacturing practices, doing dissolution, disintegration, mass spectroscopy, liquid chromatography. Of the companies I deal with, I actually tour the companies that we deal with. I look at their lab. I look at their Q&A. I look at their history of reports on, are you doing what you say you're doing, right? Because if we use something for a patient and you come back in for a follow-up, I want to be able to assess, was it working or not? I don't want to have to scratch my head and go, well, I wonder if that was a bad batch or bad lot if we weren't seeing the results at the time that we were expecting. Using the right quality is going to take that off the table. The most expensive supplement is the one that doesn't work. So even if it's $1, you got it on sale, you wasted $1 if it didn't do anything. I'd rather spend the right money and get the right quality and get the right supplement to get you to where you want to be. Certainly, 80% of what's out in the market space, especially for CBD, is not what it's labeled. Same's true for supplements, and that's why I'm stuck on the quality aspect. So I know we've gone over a lot already. So kind of recap, you may be scratching your head, okay, what can I start on now? I've got some stress, having a little bit of trouble sleeping, feeling a little bit overwhelmed in the afternoon. Well, again, our baseline, the phytonutrient multi with the fish oils, that really serving as the baseline, bringing in some CBD. Generally, I'll start with the 900 milligram tincture. We've got a variety of strengths. Start with a third of a dropper full and kind of increase that up until desired response. To layer on top of that, certainly cortisol support. That is the adaptogenic, really cooling, if you will, for the adrenals. One at breakfast, one at lunch. If you've got a lot of that stress and anxiety and you're having trouble focusing, your mind is just, I can't shut it off, then let's bring in some L-theanine. As a baseline, I'll do 1 capsule 2 times a day, and then plus a third or fourth dose if needed. Okay. And even we'll get push those right up against bedtime if it's bedtime and all of a sudden the mind gets kind of fired back up. Again, plus or minus something for sleep. One of my favorite go-tos, I can't tell you how many 90-plus-year-old women I have on the Delta 8 gummies to help with sleep. It's just been a game changer for so many folks. Thyroid support complex. So that's going back to, if you've checked off a bunch of these thyroid symptoms, this is analogous to our cortisol support formula, to where it is an adaptogenic formula. It's not going to push it too high. It's not going to push it too low. It can be used with, well, Baylor, I'm on thyroid replacement now, but I still have symptoms. Can you use it with current thyroid therapy? The answer is yes. It is an adaptogenic formula. 1 capsule 3 times a day. Works very well tolerated. So hopefully that gives you a little idea on, okay, where can I start? Where can I go? What can I do to move forward and get the ball rolling? Because, this is a wonderful time of year. It's absolutely fantastic, but it can also be very stressful for so many, whether it's kind of getting the house ready to have company or whether you're getting ready to travel. Lord knows right now, flying in the US is kind of a disaster. If you don't, if it's under an 8-hour flight, even the airlines are telling you if it's under 8 hours, drive, right? So what do we do? How do I get started? So you can visit certainly our website. You can visit your local Revelation Family Pharmacy, give them a call, give us a call. Start on the essentials, right? Get going on the basics. If you've got a lot of adrenal type symptoms, then let's get a adrenal saliva kit that's looking at the cortisol and looking at the DHEA, dehydroepiandrosterone. That's another one of the hormones secreted by the adrenals. Certainly, if you're having a lot of thyroid labs, a lot of thyroid symptoms, and we can certainly look at those as well. You can call or email Allison. She is our patient care coordinator. She can get you scheduled for a consult and get all that information and work with you. She is patient care at southriverrx.com. Go into your local facility, speak to your educated staff. They can help you. If you're going, oh, wait a second, post-traumatic brain injury, I've had a concussion, or my child's had a concussion. Yes. Do I use synapsin for kids? Yes, absolutely. Have I used it for my own children? Yes. I've got 6 kids. I can't tell you how many concussions we've had between all 6 of them. Lord knows. One of my second oldest, he concussed out of sports by the time I think he had finished his 10th grade. So yes, I can tell you from a practitioner standpoint, from a father's standpoint, husband standpoint, et cetera. Absolutely. Again, if we need to do that, then we are going to need to engage a practitioner and get a prescription for you for that. Certainly, give us a like on Facebook, sign up for our email newsletter. We give out very informative information. We try not to spam you. We do not sell your information. Don't believe in that. So questions. I know we've gone over a lot. There is a Q&A button, and I may need to push something here so I can see the questions and answers. On here too, right here that's the link for the webinar next month, or you can take a picture of that with your phone, and it's a QR code. Man, that takes you right to it. Technology these days is absolutely beautiful. All right, let's see what we've got. No open questions. All right, guys, I'll give you just a minute to put in some things here for you. While you're doing that, I do want to thank you for tuning in with us today. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your attention. It does take a little bit for this to get all recorded and wrapped up. Generally, give us a couple of days, and then we will be putting that on our YouTube channel as well. We'll be emailing you out a link to the recording. So if there's something that we went through today and you're like, oh man, wait a second, you said that too fast, Baylor. I tried to say the very pertinent stuff more than once, right? But keep in mind, when I lecture, and I've lectured all over the world, and practitioners of all sorts of different degrees, I can spend a week educating practitioners just on the adrenals alone. Okay, so we went over a lot of information relatively fast today. So I do realize that you may be kind of swimming just a little bit on it. And we did get a little chat in. Thank you. Thank you. So helpful. That's fantastic. That makes my day. You know, I generally sleep very well. I practice what I preach. And I am definitely that go like a banshee. Any comments on hormonal roller coaster or episodic Cushing's in particular? I may need a little bit more data from that for that. So if I'm going to assume you're talking, you know, that cortisol kind of bouncing around a little bit. You know, with that piece, I would think more, let's get on the cortisol support 1-2 a day. If you have been diagnosed with Cushing's, and certainly I'd want to see historically what your labs have been, what medications you're on, where your sex hormones are, what the diet and exercise look like as well, so we can factor that on into your equation as well. But certainly overall, you know, if that cortisol is kind of bouncing around a little bit and you're having a hard time getting control of that, then overall adaptogenic support for the adrenals would definitely be a no harm, no foul. Very good question. Any other questions this afternoon? You got me. Take advantage of it. Does the Delta 8 contain THC? Absolutely. It is Delta 8 THC. And that's why I say if you are susceptible to drug testing at work, then that would be a no-go. Then we could use our Boxley's Organic Sleep Gummies or Sleep Soft Gels, as that has broad spectrum CBD, not containing THC, CBN, as well as some melatonin. So that would be a good option for you if you're worried about the THC piece. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're in the healthcare. Yeah, and you know, the rules and that sort of thing are changing more and more every day. The acceptance, the testing on it is definitely decreasing, but you know, if you are susceptible to testing, then you definitely don't want to pop that up. Question on how to approach a PCP about post-traumatic brain injury. I tell you what, email Allison, patientcare@southriverrx.com. Allison has a handout on synapsin. It also has a template for how to prescribe it. So that's one step. Or depending which local pharmacy you have, reach out to them. Let's say you're near Austin Compounding Pharmacy, reach out to Austin and Omar and those guys there. If Omar doesn't have that handout, he's got my cell phone, he's got my email. I can share that with him, and he can give that to you, and then they can reach out to your practitioner and help coordinate that with you. So whichever one of your is your main go-to pharmacy, you can utilize them, and they can help facilitate with that. Dosing of L-theanine for children. Basically think of it this way. Adults, children these days, children are kind of big, right? You can have a 13-year-old that can be 120 pounds. I would treat them as an adult. So really kind of once they get below that 110 pounds is where I'm going to start scaling that back. So if I have a 7 or 8-year-old that's, more 70, 80 pounds, then we do have one that's 100 milligrams per capsule as well. They could do the chewable, and that's where we would pull that in. So there again, if it's a 3-year-old, then I'm going to probably dial that back to maybe 30, 40, 50 milligrams even. So kind of a little bit age / also weight dependent, if that makes sense. Next question. Thank you so much. Now I know where to get supplements. Been on cortisol manager for a few weeks and it's working. Fantastic. Finally sleeping after having insomnia, but still waking up some at 3 or 4 a.m. So this patient is been doing the cortisol manager, which works really well for deep sleep. I like it a lot for delta wave sleep. Generally with cortisol manager, you can do 1 to 3 tablets. Generally, I tell you 30 to 60 minutes before bedtime. So start with 1. If that's not doing it, go up to 2. If that's not doing it, go up to 3. Then from there, if you're still waking up at that 3, 4 a.m. time, yes, I would do melatonin CR5. And that is just 1 tablet. You just need one of those. It's 5 milligram biphasic, and do that again also about 30 minutes or so before bedtime. And you can stack the melatonin CR5 on top of the cortisol manager. They play very nicely together. Absolutely. Which supplements would you suggest for early stage Alzheimer's patients? All right, that's a fantastic question. Certainly gone off just a little bit. So we'll probably be having something later in the year in 2023 on brain health. If you go to South River's YouTube channel, I believe we have something on that now. If you don't want to wait to see a full hour-long presentation on it, we should have one archived on our website. But okay, so the basics, right? So the basics would be phytonutrient multi because of the methylated Bs. I'd go heavier, 2 tablets, or if you're capsules on that, 3 capsules. Fish oils, pure omega 1000. I would do 3 or 4 a day. It's going to help the right side of the brain talk to the left side. The synapsin, without a doubt, and I would go heavy. I'd go ahead and start with 3 sprays twice a day, and then CBD. You're going to want to get that CBD up to somewhere between 50 to 100 milligrams. I got to share this with you. I had a patient that I worked with thousands and thousands of patients, certainly through the years, but this one in particular wants CBD. See, we've only had CBD that we've been able to use since December of 2018. So this is fairly recently. Had a lady that was in, and she came in with her husband, and they were sent to me from their GYN. She was in at the GYN, and the GYN said, hey, you know what? You need to go see Baylor for hormone replacement therapy, for bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. Why? Because there's nothing better for a woman's brain than natural estrogen. For guys, it's testosterone. So that's why I have that in this presentation today. Hormonal balance plays a huge role, not just adrenal hormone balance, thyroid hormone balance, but also sex hormone balance. So she came in for me for that. And I was asking her why, because she was older, right? She's, mid 70s, starting on hormones for the first time, never been on them a day before of her life. And so I started talking to her and find out why she's doing it. And I said, hey, look, let's talk about CBD. And then also, would you be open to this nasal spray? She said, yes. And the husband's about in tears. Yes, please. Thank you, God, whatever you can do for my wife. I greatly appreciate it. They came back in. So we got them started on the synapsin, got them on the bioidentical hormones, and she started the CBD. And for those that are local, you know, it's rare to kind of catch me on the sales floor, because most of the time I'm either giving presentations, I'm consulting with patients one-on-one, or I'm in my back office talking to practitioners or something. So, but occasionally I'll pop out. Well, that day I just happened to pop out. And I caught them in the sales floor. It was about a month after they started, and they were waiting there to talk to me, ironically enough. And I was like, oh Lord, I was thinking, oh, right. And they literally, both of them had tears in their eyes, and said, you know what, this may not sound like much, but for the first time, and I can't tell you how long, I've remembered to get the clothes out of the washer and out of the dryer. It's huge. So it does make a difference, and you can see a difference relatively pretty quick. So hopefully that helps with some template into early Alzheimer's, as well as late stage too. I was put on antidepressant for issues similar to this. Is there a reason to think I could switch to more of these nutritional supplements instead of that? How should I go about making and taking that change, talking to my doctor about it? Ideally, I would set up a consult, and ideally what I would do is get the neurotransmitter test. Why? Let's see where your neurotransmitters are. Typically, okay, as a rule of thumb, I do not say go off of your antidepressant today and let's start on the natural agent tomorrow. No. I don't play that game. I keep you on whatever meds you're on. We add to it. We get you feeling better. We get you balanced. And then we work on slowly tapering you off whichever antidepressant it is. Okay. And that's why I didn't mention the name, because it really doesn't matter. Anyhow, a taper slowly. We can also work with the doctor, and if we need to, we could even compound if you're really sensitive to meds. I've got patients that are extremely sensitive, so we're very used to that. We could make a liquid to where we can titrate by milligrams, every week. So typically I'm going to titrate over about a 4 to 6 week time period to slowly get that. So great question. One other question that came in: do you offer L-theanines for dogs on the website? We should. And I say that because literally we have 10,000 different SKUs in the store, and the majority of those are on the website, but we're always kind of finding something sometimes that fell through the cracks. So we do have chews for that. If you don't see it, it should be on there. Then you can certainly reach out and you can just order it over the phone. So she found them and they're in beef, and the pup's allergic to beef. So with that, what I would do is get our capsules, get our 100 milligram capsules. And then what you could do is just open that capsule up and then work it into the food. L-theanine really doesn't taste super bitter or anything like that. So it's generally fairly well tolerated. They might even take the chewable tablet and you could cut that up. That may be a good option for you as well. So with that, last call for any other questions. You guys have been a great group today. We've had some wonderful questions. Certainly we're around. You've got a variety of staff all over the country that is more than happy to help you. We are all about helping you get your optimal health and maintaining it. So without seeing anything else, I'll bid you all a farewell. Everyone have a very happy holiday. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, and we will see you. The next webinar again will be January 11th, and we'll be talking about the thyroid. Again, if you're going to be busy that day, go ahead and sign up, and that way you automatically get the link emailed afterwards. Thank you all, and have a great day.